Thanks, guys. Like Chad mentioned, I think the moment lots of us have been waiting for this week. So I'm Marla. I head up growth for Textile, which is the organization behind Tableland. And probably no surprise based on the name of the summit, we're going to be talking a bit about DePins in the context of data today, and a bit about what we've been working on. So we've been kind of thinking about reimagining what the data layer of the internet could look like at Textile for several years. We're really excited about DePins because there's some paradigms that are inherently built in that I think are setting the stage for why we're going to finally be able to start to realize some of that vision. So as we all know, sort of the way that DePins are set up are set to incentivize suppliers who come into the ecosystem early. So being an early participant should ultimately yield you some reward down the line. So what we love about that is when you think about the DePins that are truly building these networks for builders, we're not just looking for people to create supply, we're looking for people who are coming to the ecosystem to add value to the data that's being created. And so if done right, people are going to come in and create experiences that are built on top of this data that is gonna in turn create more value and get more people into the ecosystem. So that works really well when you start to think about how can we find new ways to monetize and use data. So we all know about the walled gardens and how data on the internet has been really siloed for as long as we can remember. And with transparency at its core, with DePin infrastructure, it's really interesting to start to think about what could monetization and value look like when those walls start to come down and when these networks are created with a view to transparency from the outset. And so we've been spending a lot of time talking to folks in the DePin space to try to really understand what tools do they need to enable this value to be unlocked and created. And so I just want to share a little bit about what we've been hearing. One major sort of, not challenge, but I guess opportunity right now is just high throughput data availability. So how do you make data available really quickly and really cheaply so that we can do all the things that we need to do with it in a decentralized way? But there's a balance there where we still need that data to be available long term. So we want to know that the data lives somewhere, and that changes sort of depending on the use case, but we do want to know that we can make that available for folks to be able to access. And there's different reasons for that, but one of those is collaboration. So if we're gonna envision this world of liquid data, then we need people to be able to come in and have access and use that data. And so obviously there's a lot of questions around how you bring privacy to that data, but there's also all this open data that we've already been creating in the Web3 space. And we wanna start thinking about how we can enable people to collaborate over that data. And then tied to that is provenance and verifiability. So if we're going to enable people to use this data, then we want to know that we're confident about where it's come from, who created it, and then ultimately who gets some sort of value attributed because they were the creators of that data. And so these are all things that have been really top of mind for us. We have two solutions currently sort of available. The first is Tableland, which you may be aware of. There's tons of documentation around it. So I'm going to keep it really high level. We're a Web3 native relational SQL database, so you can write SQL from smart contracts and dApps. But what I'm here to talk about is what we've been calling Project Basin, so it's codenamed Basin. And it's a solution for secure, permissionless object storage with programmable data availability. So really talking about how do we make data available in this decentralized way. We have a ton of different potential use cases that we've been exploring through these conversations, not just with DePin, but across the Web3 space. I'm not going to get into all of them. I'm just going to focus on two that are sort of top of mind based on the conversations we've been having in today's summit. So the first is data availability for compute. So you heard in the AI track earlier, I think Jensen made a comment about really solving for like a thin use case and making sure you're doing one thing really well and then having an open protocol that allows other people to come in and fill a use case within that need. And that's what we're really trying to do with this data availability piece, where someone like a Jensen or a compute network needs data to be available for a specific period of time so that they can calculate proofs and put the proof back on chain, but they also want that data to be available longer term because ultimately there are things like verification that something was computed fairly or that somebody wants to dispute something that happened at a certain period of time. And so what we're doing is providing that data availability for a set time and then expiring that to Filecoin for easy access down the road. Similar to that is sort of this transparency and collaboration over the data that's being created in the DePin space. So by archiving that data to Filecoin and making it easily retrievable, we're enabling the community to come in and access open data from these DePin networks. But we're also having this data availability layer for compute. And the biggest use case we're hearing right now is rewards calculation. So people are being rewarded for the contributions they're making to an ecosystem, and they want to know those calculations are fair. And so we very much sort of view this like progression towards this euphoric liquid data world to be something that's going to require many steps. But I think the first step is adding that transparency. And so I'm not going to get too much into this because Manos, who is a good friend of ours, is going to be talking a bit about how they're doing this with WeatherXM and us in a few moments. But I'll just leave sort of with this thought of we do truly believe that it's working with partners like WeatherXM and Demo, and then also working with adjacent technologies. So we've been doing these active experiments with WebStream, which is IoTech's product for DePins, with Streamer, to really figure out what are all of these pieces of the infrastructure layer that need to be solved for, and then how can we each support each other in solving those really well. And so if you are interested in talking more about any of those use cases, I'd be happy to do so. And I'm going to go ahead and pass it on to Manos.